Rebecca, whenever we hit the creation, I notice how quickly we're rushed into debating it.
Yeah, and with all that debate, I can't help but wonder if we're missing what the story is really actually trying to show us.
I felt that this week until I realized that the text wasn't asking us to solve anything, but rather to understand something.
What did you feel like it was asking?
I feel like it was asking, who am I in relation to all of God's creations? How I should view the fruits of my own efforts.
Meaning
the language of the creation keeps emphasizing intention and goodness, not hierarchy, not replacement, just people created deliberately in God's image, meant to relate and support one another, not to compete.
So less about ranking, more about connecting.
Yeah, and that changes how we hear the story if you think about it. It feels less like an origin story and more like a touchstone, which makes the question unavoidable then, right? Not how did all this happen, but what does the creation story tell me about me?
Ooh, I love that. I can hardly wait to talk about it.
I'm still learning, line upon line, slowly changing this heart of mine. Yes, I've got blind spots, they'll fade away, and I'll see clearly someday.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Still Learning, a Come Follow Me podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing Genesis chapters 1 and 2, Moses chapters 2 and 3, and Abraham 4 and 5.
I learned so much as I was preparing for this week. Sure, there's a lot of things that have been debated between creationists, evolutionists, what's symbolic, how many days, what was the time period of the creation, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of questions that we could debate until we're blue in the face, but maybe miss the point entirely.
Well, I feel like whenever that discussion opens up, whenever that debate happens, if you've got a creationist on one side of the argument and an evolutionist on the other side, I just feel like we talk past each other. Because if you peel everything back, we're arguing very much the same thing. And it's just about, was it designed or did it just accidentally happen? I spent the greater part of my career as a computer programmer and software design. I remember there was one guy, a close friend in the same profession, and he said, Gunnar, no matter how often we have tried, we have never accidentally gotten a program to work. I thought, he's 100% right. But if you think about it, we all agree that there was a beginning, there was a progression from simple to complex. Life began in the water, plants emerged before animals, animals before humans, humans arrived late. So what we're disagreeing on is who did it. We say there's the Big Bang Theory, and the creation story starts with let there be light. So, what's the difference? What's the difference?
My son was telling me recently that he had a conversation with somebody who was saying, well, yeah, I just really have problems with the creation story. It just doesn't make sense. And my son said, yeah, tell me. And the guy said, well, like this whole thing about let there be light before he even separates the light from the darkness. And my son goes, oh, yeah, okay, so scientifically that is what happened. There was one thing after another after another. There are a number of things in the account of the creation that are still stumbling blocks for this son who was having this conversation. But it was funny to him how every objection that somebody who knew a little less science than him, and I know a lot less science than him, but someone who knew a little less science than him had, was one of those things where he had to go, well, actually, yeah, science agrees with that.
Yeah, and I think there's some metaphors in there in this whole light and darkness thing too. I find it fascinating. I haven't quite sorted it all out in my mind why I think it's fascinating, but I find it fascinating that darkness cannot overpower light.
Yeah.
That no matter how dark something is, you can introduce light into that darkness. Right?
And you can't introduce darkness into light, can you?
That's right. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, you
Right?
cannot.
It's-
You cannot. You can light a candle in the pitch black, and it ceases to be pitch black. You cannot impose a spot of black into a light room.
The only way is to extinguish the light.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that light travels at 300,000 kilometers a second. And how fast does darkness travel? Darkness travels at the same speed, but it chases the light. And so I think all of that, there's something real in there for us as we live. You know, it's interesting that Christ is the light of the world. And we have the light of Christ in us. So we have his light. And Christ does teach to let your light so shine. The light that we're letting shine is his light. We're reflecting his light. So then you get to this whole idea of, okay, so that means we're like mirrors reflecting Christ's light. So what does a mirror need to do to reflect light? The very first thing it needs is it needs to be pointed in the right direction. It needs to be pointed towards the light so it can reflect it, right? That's a great metaphor for how we should live our lives, right?
Yeah.
If the mirror is a little dirty, it's not going to reflect as well, right?
I'm remembering that thing you taught us last year about the refining of silver.
Yes,
Can you
right.
quickly review that?
Well, when you're refining silver, you've got to heat it up, and the dross rises to the top, and the silversmith has to keep skimming the dross off the top of the silver. And the way the silversmith knows that the silver is now pure is when he can see his face reflected in the silver. And so he doesn't need any sort of 21st century devices to test the silver. He just needs to be able to see himself. And so that's been the way it's been for thousands of years. And so the refiner is heating us up. He's skimming the dross off of us, skimming the dross, making us better until he can see his face reflected in our countenance. So the other thing is that, a mirror can be distorted. So it's a pretty good mirror, but it's distorted. And I feel like that's sort of like philosophies of men mingled with scriptures. You're still getting some light, but you're getting it a little distorted. I think all those things are really fascinating, and I couldn't help but think about it when we started talking about creation and light.
Okay, so I love that emphasis on light and on the things that we do share an understanding of. For me, looking at the creation story, I am just so touched by the power and the violence, actually. Violence is not quite the right word, but it's just, this is not a dainty, easy, painless process. This involves like massive movement of tectonic plates. It involves volcanoes. It involves like massive destruction takes place alongside the creation. And for me, that's quite instructive because it means I need to be willing to go through the process, which is often painful, of becoming more than I was. It's not a speak and suddenly happens, tomorrow speak again and something else suddenly happens. Although that's the way the story is rehearsed. We're talking about an extraordinary amount of patience and planning and timing and preparation of one thing after another, and it can look so slow. When I went to the Museum of Natural History at Thanksgiving Point in Lehi, Utah, and walking through that Museum of Natural History, just struck by God's patience and careful preparation. So we're going to put in here a picture of something I just want to read about this thing that this picture is of something called a stromatolite or stromatolites. They still exist, but for about, according to carbon dating, 2 billion years, these were kind of the life form on Earth. These were mats and mounds of cyanobacteria and blue-green algae. For this lengthy period of time, this one life form had one job, to photosynthesize, and it is believed that they are largely responsible for releasing oxygen into the oceans and the atmospheres. Until they came along, Earth's air had no oxygen. And I just see so much of God's patience and careful planning. And let's do this thing first and let it have its time, and then that prepares the way for the next form of life. And I also get this sense of momentum. Things speed up as after the careful preparation has been done. So that's one of the things that really strikes me about the creation.
You talk about patience. I can't fathom what kind of patience was involved, because you got to know he was excited. He was excited about what he was going to do. This was his work and his glory.
Yeah.
Right? And he hadn't even gotten to the man part yet. He was having to wait for oxygen to be created. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It says in the scriptures that everything was created. It says all the hosts were created before the first plant was formed. So we were around.
Maybe also exercising patience, huh?
I had a good friend say, we all want patience, but we want it right now.
Or maybe I just want you to have patience. So I don't need it.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, well, the thing that is definitely the most interesting to me about the creation story is about the creation of Adam and Eve, man and woman.
It probably took me decades to buy into Adam and Eve. I was in my early 30s when I joined the church. One of the things I've often said when I don't understand something, I just shelve it away and come back to it from time to time. I don't say, well, I can't believe everything because I don't believe this thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I didn't believe was Adam and Eve. I was pretty well bought into the theory of evolution, and I just couldn't get past one man and one woman.
My understanding is that our doctrine is more open than we commonly believe. My understanding is that there has been a cultural tendency to say, it happened this way, this is literal, and then stretch it as far as, well, every time it says day in the scriptures, it actually means 1,000 years. And then stretch that a little further, like all of that. There has been a cultural tendency to try and determine that this is exactly what something was meant. And my understanding is that that our official doctrine is way more open than our cultural take on it is. Whether or not there were other people that we would recognize as human predating Adam and Eve or along the same time as Adam and Eve, my understanding is we don't actually have a doctrine on that. We do have a doctrine that God created Adam and Eve and that they are our ancestors. I kind of like that there is so much mystery in the creation story that when I say mystery, I mean a whole bunch of open-ended questions. Because we've also talked quite a bit about how God speaks to us in our language, as he does with the story of our origins, too. He must speak to us in language that we can hear, and as we progress and our understanding improves, that language might change, actually. And we're looking at a story that is many thousands of years old.
I also think things are greatly summarized.
Oh, yeah.
We're covering millennia, and we're just saying, in this day, and then that day, and then this other day. It's
Yeah.
how do you talk about it? It's this time, it's this age, it's this thing happened first. It's more about the order in which things happened. And even at that point, I think the message is it was intentional
Yeah.
and there was a sequence.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that I find really fabulous about it is that God over and over again says he saw it and it was good.
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't done yet, but he was able to recognize that it was good. And I think that's a message for all of us to realize, you're not done yet. You can be good and not be done.
Rejoice in the way stations along the way
Yeah.
towards our destiny. I love that.
Yeah.
So this week, I looked at the Hebrew to understand the story of the creation. With Strong's Concordance, you can actually look at the Hebrew and the English together on the same page. It has the Hebrew in the Hebrew alphabet, and it has a transliteration so that you can understand how it's spoken, if you know how to read those English letters in a way that sounds Hebrew. And then it has a translation, which is really interesting if you know a little bit of Hebrew, because the translation is not precise. So I had so much fun with that this week. And so here is what I learned. First of all, when it talks about God creating man, we sometimes use the word man and we sometimes use the word Adam. And when I say we, I mean like when we're reading Genesis and also when we're reading Moses and when we're reading Abraham. It's interesting because of the way that the Hebrew is formed. And then you look at Abraham, and in Abraham it says, and the gods, right? It keeps saying that.
Right.
And in Genesis, it's and God. But in the Hebrew, it's Yahweh Elohim. So I found that interesting because that's Elohim. I think we know that Elohim is already in form plural. Im is the plural suffix that you put on the end of a masculine word or a neutral word, like a masculine or a word that has more than one. So Elohim is by its very nature is a plural word. It literally means gods. We use it to apply to the Father, but it is Yahweh Elohim that's in the original Hebrew, which I thought was very interesting. But going on, it says that God created man. The word for man is not the word that we use for a man, a male person. A male person.
You're talking about the Hebrew?
In the Hebrew.
Okay.
So in the Hebrew, when God created man, God created Adam. And that word means humankind. It does not mean a male person. The word for male person is Ish. And the word for female person is Isha. And the word for humankind is Adam, which also means, it comes from the word Adama, which means soil. And it's just so interesting because as I'm reading this account over and over and over, what I read is not God created man in his own image, but God created the human in his own image. And male and female created he them.
So when you say the human, are you saying humankind or are you saying one person?
Well, what the interesting thing is the prefix "the" appears in every iteration of that word until Genesis chapter 4. Except there's a couple places where you've got a prefix, like a preposition that's stuck on the front of the word, and that makes the not necessary. But it's the. God created the Adam, the humankind, or the human. And we're translating it in all these different ways, right? And it's interesting to me that it's been translated from a perspective in a world where we have defaulted to male being generic, created he, him.
Right.
But nowadays, more of us are using the language of them as a generic, meaning not identifying the gender.
So let me just kind of say it back to you. See if I got it. You're saying up until Genesis chapter 4, it appears the way the Hebrew is written that we are probably talking about one human when we say Adam, when we see Adam in the scriptures. And then in Genesis chapter 4, it seems to switch to humans.
No, let me
Multiple,
clarify.
no.
Thank you. Thank you. Up until Genesis chapter 4, which is after Adam and Eve have left the Garden of Eden,
Right?
up until that time, the word Adam does not appear as a personal name. It appears as a reference to the human or humanity. We, in our translations, we pull out the part and we say God created Adam. But it is more of an ambiguous word that can reference all of humanity. And it is not specifically masculine. It is a reference to humankind or the human. For me, I'm just going to tell you how I take this. There's something else that I learned about the language that I thought was very interesting. The word for man, meaning a male person, does not appear until Eve is created. Let's go to Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 to 24. If we were to translate this a little differently from how it appears in Genesis, using the language of Adam as human, it would say this, starting in verse 18, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that the human should be alone. I will make him a mighty helper, corresponding to him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto the human, to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the human called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And the human gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam," and here there's the "for" in front of it, so it could be the Adam, or it could just be Adam. That's ambiguous. "But for Adam there was not found a mighty helper corresponding to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the human, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof, and the rib which the Lord God had taken from the human made he a woman, and brought her unto the human. And the human said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she is taken out of man." That is the first time that man appears, right after the woman. "She shall be called woman, Isha, because she is taken out of man, Ish. Therefore shall a man, Ish, leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, Isha, and they shall be one flesh." So I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but I have talked for quite a while, so I'm going to turn this over to you for a few minutes first, Gunnar, before I say anything more.
Well, I want to ask is, how does that change the meaning of what we just read?
Okay.
Do you find that it changes the meaning?
To me, it does.
How?
Okay. So, to me, it doesn't say that males were created first and then females came after to exist in order to help the males, which is the way I used to understand it.
Okay.
Instead, there's actually a whole bunch of things that it opens up to me. The first thing is that scripture from Abraham, where it says, even before it talks about creating Adam, it talks about God creating man, the human, God creating humankind in his image, male and female created he them, right? What it suggests to me, as I've sat on this all week long, I've been sitting on this, and I've also been studying a new book called You and We by Jim Farrell, who was of the Arbinger Institute, that probably a bunch of our listeners will be familiar with. It says it is not good for the human to be alone. And God needs for this mighty helper. We've translated it helpmeet. That language doesn't occur anywhere else in the Bible. The help is Ezer, which occurs often in the Bible and most frequently refers to the kind of help that God gives to his people. especially in military situations, but it is like mighty help. References something that is in front of or corresponding to or possibly even in opposition to, but like it would be an equal and corresponding to him. And so there's this sense of a need for something that does not leave the human isolated. Something that is corresponding and other. Something that is other, but connects with the human. And then according to the Genesis account, God goes and demonstrates that none of the beasts is equivalent for that. There is no other. And then there is a separation of humankind into male and female. Now, the proclamation on the family declares that gender is an essential characteristic of premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. I know that some scholars have looked at that and gone, okay, you know what, maybe human was created both male and female in one person and then separated out into two. And that reading doesn't sit well with me, particularly because of our understanding of the nature of gender being something that is of eternal significance. But it has occurred to me that the differences between men and women, they do change over time, right? Like the biological, the hormones of the male and female hormones, we share more. I have more male hormones at this later end of my life. And so there's this toning down of some of the biological differences that happens as we mature. And the biological differences are quite pronounced when we're young. And there's kind of this sense for me, this sense of possibility that we humans need those differences to be a force that moves us forward and helps us become more godly as we learn to connect. That is basically my takeaway. I want to hear what you think.
I think I had a little trouble, honestly, following the entire thread. I think it's interesting that it's important to you about who was created first. Because, to me, whoever's created last is the most important. The easy metaphor for me is, I think of Beethoven. Which was his greatest symphony? It was not his first. It was his last symphony, his ninth symphony, right? And that is, in music, it appears to me to be practically universally the truth. I think about Sibelius, one of my favorite composers. Mm-hmm. He wrote 7 symphonies. He wrote his last symphony, his 7th symphony, when he was 60 years old. He lived another 30 years and didn't write another symphony. And when asked why he stopped writing symphonies, he said that symphony, that 7th symphony, was the symphony he had been trying to write his whole life. And now he had written it, so he stopped. It was done. He had accomplished what he was trying to accomplish. And that's the way, I look at this creation story. I think that God wasn't done until he had created his co-creator. And I think every man who doesn't counsel with his wife, who doesn't respect his wife's opinion, her thoughts, her insights, is frankly a fool. I know that my wife is extremely empathetic and makes me, by comparison, completely unempathetic. I like to think she tells me I am empathetic, but I do not compare to her level of empathy. We were watching something on TV. This was 3 months ago or something like this. It was just some black and white footage from World War II. And it was probably a concentration camp or footage of children in prison uniforms, in a concentration camp or something like this. And I'm watching and I'm thinking, man, this is amazing. This is unbelievable, right? It's just shocking. And I start hearing whimpering. And I look next to my mom, she's like full on bawling. Yeah. And I stopped the TV and turned the channel. I was killing her. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, this happened 80 years ago. We know this history. We know it's terrible. And it's still, she felt it like she was walking among them. She was living it. She's just so much better than I am. She thinks of her friends and her neighbors and her parents all the time. And, she would tell me, when was the last time you called your mother? It was like, maybe a month had gone by. I hadn't called my mom. She's like, you need to call your mother. And she's right. She's 100% right. But I haven't even thought of my mom for a month, And, I tell her from time to time, I'll say, well, you talk to your mom every day. She said, I don't talk to my mom every day. She talks to her mom every day.
Trudy, he outed you.
Maybe she doesn't, but it sure seems like every day.
We could let her on the next podcast to defend herself.
No, but her mom's her best friend, and it's really wonderful. It's really wonderful to see that. I'm telling you, she gives me insights all the time. I'll be real frustrated with something or somebody. I'll mention it to her, and she gives me another way to think about it. Mm-hmm. And it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. She strengthens me. She teaches me. She is patient with me. I think when I think of helpmate, I think of somebody who is an equal partner but plays a different role. And we are each other's helpmates. I see.
And that's so important, what you just said. That is the fundamental. Oh, when you're finished, I want to get back to that. But we are each other's helpmates. Please carry on.
Yeah, I use this metaphor a lot for a number of different things, but I'll use it again. I think of a car, and I think of there's an engine and there's a transmission. And neither of them can do their job if the other wasn't doing their job. Now, that job doesn't mean the laundry and the dishes, taking the kids to school and this kind of thing, and the other one is going to work and, fighting it out in the political realities of whatever the office is. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, as a human being, I have shortcomings. And my wife helps me overcome those shortcomings. And it's also true the other way around. We'll often say that between the two of us, we have one good brain. But I've also seen it where one of us, when our testimony is maybe not feeling as solid, we haven't been as good about our personal scripture study or something like this, and are feeling a little distant. One of the things I love is that we're able to kind of speak straight with each other, not cruelly, not with impatience, and not with a temper, or not condescending, but we're able to just let the other know what we're witnessing. And I think of Emily Dickinson saying, a good friend is a thorn in your side, right? It's so true. My wife is loving, caring, nurturing, but she also kind of tells me, you could be doing that better now. Now, granted, 99 times out of 100, she's saying very complimentary things and beautiful things, but when it needs to be said, it's said, and I appreciate that.
I feel like you just described so beautifully a lot of what I was trying to describe in terms of that concept that we need the difference between male and female in order to grow, and that we are not whole except together.
Yeah.
Not in a codependent, you need me, I need to be needed way. And I guess for me, the reason, like you talked about why it's for you, the creation, the last creation is the finest creation. For me, through much of my life, I understood this story as basically a story where Adam is the main character and Eve existed to bring Adam unto God. That Eve is kind of the mentor character. Adam is the main character. Eve's purpose in being is her function for her husband. And that may, like,
Yeah.
I
No, I can see that. I can see that. But yeah, go ahead and finish your point.
and the thing is, I lived that way.
Yeah.
I thought my job was to be the helpmeet. I did not understand that we are each other's helpmeet.
Yeah. Let me say that the second to last sentence a little bit differently. You understood your job was to be the helper, not the helpmeet.
The helper that had the name of helpmeet, but was actually both above and below.
Well, I guess my point is there are two things that I think cause us problems in this series of scriptures culturally. What is this word helpmeet? Because helpmeet sure sounds like helper, sure sounds like housemaid, sure sounds like, somebody in the background just kind of keeping everything in order while the other one is forging ahead, leading armies into battle and whatnot. But the other thing is that the whole context of the scriptures, we're talking about a patriarchal society, a patriarchal order of things. And the writing is 100% from a male perspective. And every once in a while, I feel like the writers threw a bone to the women and said, and there's Ruth, and there's Mary, aren't you glad we didn't stone her, us guys? And,
Or there's the Shunammitish woman who doesn't have a name, but she's
right.
mighty.
And there's the woman at the well.
Yeah.
So, there's, so I can understand that this interpretation that you had. I looked through a lot of the General Conference talks, especially in the last 100 years, and there's just so much talk about this helpmeet being a source of strength and not dependency, a co-laborer in God's purposes, a counterpart without whom God's plan stalls or fails. There's definitely nothing that the church teaches that speaks of men being dominant in this relationship with wife. The one exception, and I think it's just an interpretation, but it's another easy misinterpretation to make, is the fact that the men have the priesthood and therefore the home is to have this patriarchal order, and there can be a lot of unrighteous dominion as a result of that. And I think Joseph Smith was very much aware of that as he wrote in The Doctrine and Covenants. We have learned by sad experience that it is the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they will immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion. And I think, honestly, Thomas Jefferson said power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't think it's limited to men. I think it's part of our human nature. It's part of what the scriptures refer to as the natural man.
I really appreciate the things that you've said, and I just feel like for me, what I have learned by learning that Adam means human, there are a few things that I've learned that are really important to me. One is that helpmeet goes both ways. We are each other's helpmeet. Yes, the man needs the woman, and the woman needs the man. The differences between us that sometimes drive us crazy, and that may not have been your experience in your marriage, Gunnar, but most of us have those experiences where those differences are, well, you said a good friend is you quoted Emily Dickinson on the good friend is a thorn in your side. One of the things that has come to me is that possibly in the premortal life, we were more united than we are now. The sexes probably knew how to get along better than when we came to earth, but now we have this, I have this sense of this difference occurring. And you mentioned priesthood being given to Adam. And I believe personally that was compensatory blessing, because in the division between man and woman, woman got the advantage of the remarkable gifts that come along with childbearing, child carrying, in terms of that opportunity that gives us to draw closer to God. I suspect that there is a dividing of humankind into something that is more separate in order that we can together become united and godly.
It's always dangerous when you speak in broad strokes because there's always going to be an exception out there. But just broadly speaking, men seem to find it easier to compartmentalize things. It's like they've got every aspect of their life in a box somewhere in their brains. And when they're dealing with that aspect of their life, they pull that box out and they deal with what's in that box. They have the ability to shut things out and just really focus on something. And that focus might be the football game. And they don't hear anything else going on because they're watching the game. That can be a problem and it can be a blessing, right? My wife thinks about everything and it's great. I'm glad she thinks about everything. I feel like because she does, I don't have to worry about anything because she's worrying about everything. She's got everything covered. And so between the two of us, we've been together for a long time. So I feel like we figured out how to leverage each other's strengths and rely on each other. And for us, I believe it works. Maybe we need to invite her on the next episode so she can concur or point out where it doesn't work. But I think a lot of times the things that we see as problems is because we're seeing them through the prism of how we manage ourselves. And that other person is another person with their gifts.
Yeah.
What comes along with those gifts are other challenges, but there are other things that they do really, really well. I'll give you one simple thing. We had a good friend, longtime friend, did our landscaping. And he did an awful job. And I told my wife, I was like, we got to fire him. We got to fire him. I can't handle this. I can't handle it. What a terrible job this guy's doing. And she was like, no, Gunnar, you can't fire him. He's our friend. And I remember what little hair I have left, I was pulling. I was like, no, I got to fire this guy. And I finally took a deep breath. And I said, sweetheart, you are much better at relationships than I am. So I'm going to defer to you on this. We will not fire him because you understand the value of friendships and the value of relationships better than I do. So I know to defer to her.
Well, Gunnar, you have a song about a husband and wife finding perfection in each other, don't you?
This is a song that I've been working on for Brother Joseph. It's Emma and Joseph before they get married, as they're falling in love.
Perfectly. I see you perfectly in your eyes. I see my eternity perfectly. Oh, please tell me what to do. All I know is I love you. Please hold me and let your love enfold me, sweet Queen of Queens, man of my dreams. Perfectly, perfectly.
Well, I love that song. It's soaring and it's beautiful and speaks to the dignity that two souls who love God see in each other. I just really feel like that's a nice encapsulation of the relationship that our Father in heaven designed for us when he created Adam and Eve. So thank you, Gunnar.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we would all do better if we saw each other perfectly. Yeah.
So what I really learned in the creation story this week was that as humans, we need the differences between man and woman to bring us closer to God, to become united, not the same, but united.
Yes. And I agree. Much like the Godhead is united,
Yeah.
one on purpose.
How about you, Gunnar?
Yes. For me, I love this idea that things can be good before they're finished. And I think that when we look at that creation story, one of the big things we should take away from it is that however we are, wherever we are in our process of discipleship, our process of drawing closer to God, we are good. It is good. It is good to be where we are right now. And we may, as you said, the creation was just this tumultuous time and volcanoes and heat and pressure and all this. But that's what it took to create where we are today. And so as we're feeling that heat and the pressure and the turmoil, I think that we can take a deep breath and look at it like God did and see that it is good and move on to the next step in your process of creation. That's my takeaway.
Well, thank you. That's a wrap for this episode of Still Learning, a Come Follow Me podcast about the Old Testament. We're so grateful to spend this time with you and look forward to seeing you again next week. We're still learning, just like you.
We're still learning, line upon line, slowly gaining a heart divine. We've still got